might have been a proud warrior once, but now you're just a pawn in Dooku's game.
I wield great power, Jedi fool!
Welcome to A Long and Long Time Ago. My name's Martin, and with me, as always, is my cousin Adam. Hi, Adam.
How's it going? All right?
Yeah, good. We're going to try something a little bit different this week. Something that I've wanted to do for quite a while now. I think we both have an affinity to the Star Wars television series, The Clone Wars.
I've only seen it once through, I think, but so not to the sort of level that you have, but I've very much enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I mean, for the most part.
It's possibly my favourite Star Wars, or one of my favourite Star Wars shows, if not in the total of canon. I think I love the Clone Wars, and so what I thought we'd try and do is, and I kind of phrased it as our top 10 favourite Clone Wars episodes, but I suppose it's really
it's yours
top 10 favourite episodes. But at the same time, it's not really the top 10 either, because I had to try and choose 10 of my favorite episodes, and I could only get it down to 15. And you said, no, we're doing 10. So I managed to get it down to 11 as a compromise. So why 11? Well, I simply couldn't knock an extra one off because they're all my favorites. So, and before we start, I just have to say, these might not be the best Clone Wars episodes, but they're my favorite Clone Wars episodes. So, with that little caveat out of the way, I'm going to start in broadcast order, and this is in no particular order, but the first.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. This isn't a list from 11 down to 1, is it? This is just in no particular order your favorite 11 episodes, because I guess you couldn't choose a number 1 either, could you?
No, I couldn't choose a number 1. I mean, there'd probably be 2 or 3 that I could probably put in the number 1 spot. Not all 11, but yeah. So,
okay.
So
well, when we get to those, maybe you could let us know that they're the ones that are right up there at least.
Well, maybe after the 11, because we're both going to have watched them before we do the episodes, we can perhaps try and list the top 11 for the final episodes and how we would put them in order after we've spoken about them. That'd be interesting. But I'm going to do them in broadcast order. So the first episode is season 1, episode 10, Lair of Grievous. So obviously I know what I think. You've only seen these once, and I know you probably just watched this episode a couple of days ago. So what are your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, a really good episode. It gives us the opportunity to see more Grievous, which can't be a bad thing. He's a pretty cool character as far as prequel characters go. But also, I think like my main take on the whole episode was that it was great to see Kit Fisto as sort of a leading character, give him a leading role. And that's actually kind of one of the things that I like most about the Clone Wars in general, is that we do get to see other characters take the helm that you see as kind of background characters in the main films, but just they get more of a role, which is quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think the Clone Wars is predominantly about the war itself. Secondarily, and it's probably about Ahsoka and Anakin, but the third, probably most important part of the Clone Wars in general, is the fact that you get to see all these supporting characters that you only see, and a lot of them don't even have dialogue in the movies. So I think the old adage is very true, and it's something that we'll probably refer to quite a lot when we talk about these Clone Wars episodes, is it expands the prequels a lot, and I think a lot of people would say actually improves the prequels. I wouldn't say that, obviously, but a lot of people say, well, if it wasn't for the Clone Wars, I wouldn't have quite understood where they were going with the prequel movies, especially between 2 and 3. So
that's interesting, because I see the way you're saying that. I would say that it enhances them, but it doesn't. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, because what you said there is that people have used it as like an excuse, well, not as an excuse, but they've taken the Clone Wars and thought that makes the prequels make sense, whereas I think it actually just gives it a bit more meat, a bit
more depth. Yeah,
more depth. Which it can't be a bad thing.
No, I mean one. I mean, we're not talking about Lair of Grievous, and you know what we're like. But the main thing I think people point to with the Clone Wars is between episode 2 and 3, you're expected to understand that Obi-Wan and Anakin became really good friends and had banter and were brothers, you know, and you kind of got that, a small amount of that in the movies, but they didn't have very long to tell you that story. Whereas you watch the Clone Wars, and then in episode 3, you feel that when Anakin and Obi-Wan are having that duel and Mustafar, that there's a lot more to their past. They were brothers. They fought together for years in the Clone Wars, and you know, they were always had each other's back. So perhaps it feels more, there's more to it when that happens, and that's because of what they did in the Clone Wars. But anyway,
but like you say, we're getting away from from topic. Lair of Grievous.
I'm just going to sort of give snapshots of what I loved about this episode. There's a young Padawan, Nadar, who used to be Kit Fisto's Padawan learner, and who's now a fully fledged Jedi Knight, or just became a fully fledged Jedi Knight. And I think it's a really great example of the Jedi during this time, and how they were too sure of themselves, as Yoda says in episode 2, and too confident. And because they were around during this war, they didn't hold back using their powers, and they didn't particularly follow the Jedi code of old. You know, they're only there for knowledge and defense, never for attack. And I think we see this a lot in Nadar, in the way that he wants to constantly fight Grievous. He constantly wants to show off his powers, and eventually it proves his downfall.
I didn't forget to teach you restraint, did I, my old Padawan?
And you see that in the films. It kind of, again, going back to what we said, it kind of adds a little bit more depth to the films, because we kind of see that with Anakin, really, don't we? It's similar to his mindset, is that he can go out there and take them, and that's, like you say, I guess, because of being brought up throughout the Clone Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably another thing that Palpatine saw by instigating the war in the first place, is that, you know, it'd be easier to defeat the Jedi because he turned them into warriors rather than people who protected the public and the peace, you know, in the Old Republic, the Old Republic. So that's a really interesting little tidbit in the episode. I mean, Kit Fisto says revenge is not the Jedi way.
I will destroy him.
I understand your pain, but you forget your teachings, Nadar. Revenge is not the Jedi way.
But in this war, strength prevails. The rules have changed.
Perhaps you are the one who has changed.
But Nadar himself, quote, and this is a quote, says, "But in this war, things have changed." So, you know, there's evidence enough there that you know, that the younger of the Jedi are starting to change for the worse. And I think at the end of the episode, when Yoda asks Kit Fisto about Nadar,
his heart was in the right place, but he tried to answer Grievous's power with his own.
To answer power with power. The Jedi way, this is not. In this war, a danger there is of losing who we are.
Himself sees it happening, which is another reason why Yoda probably was one of the only ones who actually makes it out at the end of the Clone Wars and Order 66. So I think it's for a 22-minute animated show, there's a lot of depth in this episode, and that's why one of the reasons I like it. Something else. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, is at some point I was going to ask you, is that, you know, what's your reason really for liking this episode so much?
Yeah. I mean, you know me, I'm all about the lore in Star Wars, whether it be about the Jedi, the Sith, the Force. That's that's my religion, I suppose. That's what I really love the meat of, and Palpatine's plan, how he came up with the idea of the war and how he manipulated everybody. I find that stuff fascinating, and that's the stuff that gets me. Yes, I love the action in this episode, and we'll come to that in a minute, but that's the stuff that gets me. That's the stuff I want to know about, the stuff that they didn't have time to flesh out in the movies, the stuff that George himself didn't wanted to probably put in, but he was only able to because of the Clone Wars. And you have to remember that George's fingerprints are all over the stories. Every story had to be okayed by George Lucas, so that it was him and Dave Filoni as well who came up with this stuff. So it's really important to me that George had a real big hand in this. I think another thing in this episode that is great is you see a little bit of backstory for Grievous and how he started off as just a normal alien, if you like, but wanted to be better and better, and he always wanted to be a Jedi.
In the EU, there were a lot of stories about Grievous, that he was an incredible general that got shot down by Dooku in a shuttle and then re-engineered by Dooku to fight as a general. And we talked about that stuff. I mean, it was in a Visionaries comic book that wasn't canon. It's just a possibility. The question is, why would a great general allow himself to be sabotaged, rebuild as a robot, and then just become subservient to someone like Dooku?
There is concern you have lost your focus.
So we called George up, and he came over, and we said, what do you think about Grievous? What's his backstory? Because this is what we heard. George had a lot of ideas about where he thought Grievous came from and what he thought Grievous was about. One of the things that George had mentioned was that he had really wanted to be a Jedi.
But he wasn't Force sensitive. He wasn't able to use the Force. He knew he could never be a Sith Lord.
And his rejection of Jedi status drove him to have modifications done to his body.
These must be trophies taken from the Jedi he's murdered.
But we still elected to keep it kind of ambiguous. Some of the best stuff is because we don't take that mask off and show you what's under there.
Manipulating his body and changing his body, upgrading, as he kept saying in the episode, his body to be more of a warrior so that he could possess the powers of a Jedi, but perhaps just with the lightsaber, if you like. So you went into those rooms and you saw a representation of all the stages of how he manipulated his body and changed himself. I really thought that was great because you don't know anything about Grievous's past.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, that's very interesting side of the story. Because you look through those scenes, because I remember looking at it and because it doesn't look like Grievous, does it? The warrior that's in those statues to begin with.
No.
And it's only, like you say, as it progresses that you see.
Yes,
it's pretty cool.
And this episode as well, it just, it's an animated show, and you don't expect it, but it's so brutal. A couple of the moments, there's clones getting their backs broken. There's clones getting thrown into molten lava. It's pretty brutal, this episode on the clones. So
those clones really were cannon fodder, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. But one other thing I absolutely love about this episode, and this was the first episode where I really saw it, was the lightsaber dueling was absolutely stunning. The choreography and the animation when Kit Fisto's taking on Grievous. Couple of moments, the moment where he turns off his lightsaber and he just disappears into the sky. And then he just appears. Oh, absolutely brilliant. And the moment where he just cuts one of Grievous's hands off and the lightsaber's spinning in the air, he catches it, and then he just goes in fighting two-handed. And obviously that was Nadar's lightsaber that he's fighting with as well.
That power will only consume you.
Classic Star Wars again, having a hand cut off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. So it was such a good episode, and the way he escapes by backflipping up in the air and landing on the Jedi Starfighter and just flying off. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, overall, this is a great story told during the Clone Wars, and it gives, as you said at the beginning, it gives you loads of information about secondary characters, what was going on during the war. I mean, there was even a bit of Dooku trying to manipulate Grievous into becoming a better general, because him and Sidious were worried that he wasn't performing as he should do. So I mean, this episode has a bit of everything for me, and while it might not be the most riveting story of some of the Clone Wars that we'll see in the future, it's definitely one of my personal favorites, and that's why it's in my top 11.
Fair enough. Yeah. And my final note on it is, if you've got an astromech droid with you, you're always going to do all right.
Stop him!
Let's go home, R6.
I think R6 was quite a key player in Kit Fisto's escape there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's R2 Mark II, isn't he?
yeah. So yeah, with that, I think that's it for this episode. Tune in next time, where Martyn will go over his next episode of the Clone Wars.
Looking forward to it.
For now, like and subscribe. Yeah, like and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
Bye.